thank you guys for coming. We're going to talk about satellite monitoring, and we'll go through a little bit of background of Colorado Open Lands, how we came to use remote monitoring in our processes, in our stewardship processes. We'll talk a little bit about picking the right image to remotely monitor. And then Chelsea's also going to walk us through a few sort of hands-on exercises of deciphering images, which can be really tricky. We have great resolution in imagery nowadays, and that can provide tons of benefits for satellite monitoring, but can also cause a lot of challenges, a lot of misinterpretations, and we don't ever want to jump to conclusions when we're satellite monitoring.
So I was just curious who here uses satellite monitoring or satellite imagery right now to monitor conservation easements? So big representation. Who uses satellite imagery to monitor restoration progress?
Yeah, Karen.
Sweet. Just curious, what platforms do you guys use? Lens? All right.
We'll talk about Lens a little bit. Lens.
All right.
We didn't want to be a walking advertisement for Lens, so
Yeah.
we'll mention a few others, but there's a lot of great qualities about it.
Yeah.
I'm looking into near space labs.
Oh, I haven't.
Used it. I love the topic.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Near space labs.
Yeah. Once we go through this, we'd love for you to share any info that you guys have about that with them. Yeah.
So Colorado Open Lands, we're a statewide land trust. We have more than 700 properties. We work with more than 800 landowners, and our goal is to monitor every single property on the ground, sorry, not on the ground, it used to be until 2019, but every single property every year. And it's a lot of land to cover. It's a lot of work. In 2019, that's when Colorado Open Lands began investigating how can we improve these processes. Let's maybe think about satellite imagery and doing this thing called remote monitoring. Then in 2020, the pandemic happened and we were kind of forced to monitor 100% of our portfolio remotely. And we decided, wow, there's a ton of great benefits. Some of those being, you can see parts of the property that you don't normally get to visit, maybe because the terrain is too steep, or every year you're going to that mountain property and there's always a thunderstorm. So you get to 2 photo points and then you get chased out. And it was actually pretty cheap and it didn't take much time. So, you could spend 6 hours on a property or 30 minutes remotely monitoring. And I want to mention that remote monitoring isn't a new thing in the conservation world. So in the 1930s, what we know today as the Farm Service Agency kind of stepped in and realized that they want to take a survey of all of our agricultural lands. And this really spurred from the Dust Bowl and a couple of other economic factors happening at the time. But they had this goal from 1937 to 1941 to take aerial photographs of every single agricultural property over the course of 4 years, and they got about 90% of the way there. This is an image from 1937 in Douglas County, and you can see in 1937 they did a pretty good job collecting these aerial photographs, orthorectifying them, putting them together, and having these aerial surveys. Well, the technology has only improved. It's only gotten better and cheaper, especially after 1957 when Sputnik was launched, our first satellite. And then in 1972 with the first Landsat mission that was specifically designed for observing Earth resources and natural resources. And of course, Landsat has all the way up to 9 missions. And today you can get imagery in 30-meter resolution. And from Sentinel-2, you can get 10-meter resolution data all for free. So I just want to talk a little bit about those free resources because we'll spend a lot of time talking about Lens and sub-meter resolution, but the very first one is Google Earth Pro. And this is a great resource if you're, beginning to look on the ground, maybe you think you see a transmission line, you're not totally sure, you looked on, maybe you have ArcGIS Pro, you have that Esri imagery. It's not great, so go to Google Earth Pro and you can actually see some of those transmission lines. You can see shadows of power poles, and that have been able to uncover like potential like utility easements on properties that we don't know about yet, just by going to Google Earth Pro. The problem is you don't have consistent imagery, and those images are made up of mosaics, multiple images that were taken at the best possible time of that year, and that's why the imagery is so good. But if you're looking for a specific date, it might not be there. If you're looking for a specific time period, a growing season, you might not have imagery available. And if you want to go back year by year for multiple years, not that likely in Google Earth Pro. There's also NAPE imagery. This is 1 meter resolution, but the processing time is about 2 to 3 years. And this is free. You can get it on the USDA's website. There's a few different places you can download it, and we have our emails at the end, so if you have any questions about how to access some of these free resources, please reach out. But again, 1 meter resolution, that's pretty good, but we don't get to choose when the image was taken. The program does try to fly over at the most optimal time of year and day, but sometimes that satellite is flying and the whole area is covered in clouds. So you go to get your NAPE imagery, and you have clouds covering what you want to see. Landsat and Sentinel data are also free, and Sentinel data you can get 2 meter resolution. That's great if you're just trying to look at landscape changes over time, and both of those have about 2-week return times. So if you're trying to look at quick, rapid changes every year, you can see you can access that data. But if you're trying to look for a building, Landsat and Sentinel data might not be your best options. And I also put Google Earth Engine up here. It's a data repository. So all of the NAPE imagery, Landsat, Sentinel data, you can actually access those in Google Earth Engine, but it really helps to have some coding background. So it might not be the most user-friendly. The other thing about Google Earth Engine, though, is you can apply analyses. So if you want to look at vegetation health, water, soil moisture content, all those things, they have some preset analyses in Google Earth Engine that you can view. There's a couple other resources that we use at Colorado Open Lands, not always for monitoring, but I like to put it up here because they can be useful in other stewardship scenarios. So the National Land Cover Dataset is derived from satellite imagery. Some of you may be familiar with it, but I think that it takes satellite imagery and classifies it into things like evergreen forest, deciduous forest, cropland, shrub, scrub. If you've had to do an NRCS application for a project, you might be familiar with the National Land Cover Dataset. Cropscape is something I recently learned about. Very cool, but you can go just type Cropscape into Google and it'll show you the crops that are grown on these agricultural sites every year. And I think in Colorado, they go all the way back to 2007. So we're just starting to play around with this. It might have some water implications. We're talking a lot about water at this summit. And we're thinking if you need to prove what types of crops were being grown on your property, if your water rights are in abandonment, this might be a useful tool. And then I like to plug the dynamic surface water extent. I worked on this before I worked at Colorado Open Lands, but this is really great if you're trying to study wetland corridors, habitat restoration, specifically dealing with riparian areas. It helps uncover partial surface water and full surface water. So there's tons of resources. This is just a few of them. And then, of course, we have kind of our independent businesses. So these are very large. We have Maxar that creates images for Esri. You'll probably see Maxar on Google Earth Pro. We have Skywatch and Planet, which are some smaller businesses, other opportunities where you can purchase satellite imagery at a discounted rate because these are images that were taken commercially. And now you're saying, I just want this small portion of this image that was already taken. Can I pay for it at a smaller price than thousands of dollars that these companies have collected the data for? And then Lens. So talk briefly here about Lens. This platform we use to purchase typically sub-meter resolution data. And I'll talk more about resolution, but very briefly, resolution is the smallest item that you can decipher in an image. So if you have half-meter resolution, you should be able to look at that and see anything that is half-meter in size. If you have 10-meter resolution, you're looking at anything that is 10-meter in size. Of course, that does come with cost, so we do have to pay for the sub-meter resolution. Other neat features about Lens are you can add your own geospatial layers. So that's when we go into adding our conservation easement boundaries. And we say we really just want to purchase this portion of this boundary here. We don't need the whole image, so that we can pay $15 instead of $1,000. They have a variety of preloaded imagery layers as well. So you can see Landsat, you can see Sentinel, and you also get things, you also get smaller commercial satellite images, and that's where the sub-meter resolution comes from. And they typically come from what we call those shoebox satellites. They go up into space, they fly around for a certain amount of time that was contracted by somebody, not Colorado Open Lands, somebody else. And then eventually that becomes space trash. It's not collecting images anymore. But Lens has access to it, and you can pick from all of those different organizations and all the imagery they collected. There's analytical features, so you can compare multiple years back and forth. You can apply vegetation analyses, soil moisture analyses. They're starting to add tax parcel data. So if you're on the stewardship team and you need to check for subdivision violations, you can do that in Lens as well. Say, who owns this? Why is there multiple boundaries in the tax parcel data set? And one last really cool feature of Lens is that anything that you type into this platform, it uses AI to make a monitoring report for you. So kind of coming back to, it saves a ton of time. I want to spend some time on resolution, and once you've picked a platform that you want to particularly purchase satellite imagery from, because if you're going to spend money, you want to get the best image possible. And resolution is probably the number one thing that you're looking for when you purchase a satellite image. And this graphic kind of shows you, if you're trying to decipher changes in a larger area, you might be able to get by with 10-meter resolution. If you're trying to decipher changes in a smaller area, you need to go with better resolution, so 0.3 meter, half a meter. You can see over at the 10 meter on the smaller column, you can't really see any of the building structure at all. And you might just be wondering, what is that? I'm not sure. So in this case, 0.3 meter is going to be better. But with the 0.3 meter comes the higher cost. The Nature Conservancy put out a study of, I think the title is down here, was Remote Property Monitoring at the Nature Conservancy in California. And they actually provide this table of what type of imagery might be best. And it might be kind of small for some of you in the back. But I'll see if I can get some resources out to you all so you can see the study. What type of resolution would be best for what I'm trying to view? And you can see that 10-meter resolution works pretty well if you're trying to decipher changes in a larger landscape. It might be like, is there timber harvesting happening on this property? Do I see vegetation changes? Has there been a wildfire? Do I need to view what's happening after the wildfire? You can get by with 10-meter resolution, and that's free. That's great. You might need to start paying for things if you're really wanting to look at construction of buildings, roads, which is maybe not always going to be a road, but definitely anything small in scale needs better resolution. A couple other things you want to consider when you're picking the right image is quality. So oftentimes what can get in the way of a good picture is pollution. So if your conservation easement is close to a city, you might need to consider what time of year, what time of day is the best to get the best quality satellite image. The angle that the image was taken. So how Lens has so many different satellites or images from different satellites on its platform, you need to make sure that the angle isn't giving you too many shadows. And if you're purchasing images from multiple years, you might want to stick with the same satellite, because how the angle of the sensor is on that platform is going to change how wide a building looks, how it's going to change like how the river stream is meandering through visually. You might look at it and say, oh my gosh, the stream has moved 5 feet to the west, and that could raise alarm, you know, what happened. Really, it might just be the angle of the sensor. And kind of piggybacking off of that is the projection. So oftentimes we don't think much about overlaying these images. This is a 2D square sort of feature, a layer, and we're laying it on a sphere. And you can lay that piece of paper on a sphere many different ways. Those are called projections. And if you're looking at two images in different projections, your building might be where I'm standing, and then in an image with a different projection, it might be over here. So again, if you're not paying attention to some of those nuances in a satellite image, you're going to start questioning, oh, did the landowner create a new building? Did something happen in the last year? Which kind of goes back to what Chelsea will talk about. We don't want to jump to conclusions. We need to gather information when we're remotely monitoring. Other important things, frequency and availability. So I put these together. Actually, they're kind of two separate topics. Frequency is how often do you need to see the space that you're looking at? Do you want to see changes every year? And are they, if you need to see them every year, do you need to purchase those? Like, sorry, I'm tripping over my words. But like, for example, Landsat returns to the same spot every 2 weeks. Is that helpful to you? Do you need to see what's happening every 2 weeks? If you're purchasing imagery on Lens, and those satellites are just going up when somebody decides to purchase a mission, you might not get an image every 2 years at 1 meter resolution. You might only get one every 5 years. And we've actually had properties where we need to finish up remote monitoring. We have 2 weeks left before a deadline, and there's actually no satellite imagery available, especially in rural areas in Colorado. So then you're kind of like, well, can I monitor it with 10 meter resolution? Do I need to send somebody on the ground? And those are things you need to think about. How often do you need this image to see those changes? And availability, I guess, related is it even available, right? So like I said, in rural areas in Colorado, we've had instances where there isn't any sub-meter or 1 meter resolution imagery available. Time of year is important. If you want a picture during the image or a picture during the growing season, you don't want to purchase one in December. You don't want to purchase an image from December. Also, when you're comparing multiple years, if you purchase an image in July and next year you purchase an image in August, well, in August, we're starting to look pretty dry on the ground most places in Colorado. In July, it's pretty green. If you don't have the same time of year, you might be misinterpreting what's happening on the ground, thinking that we have a change in vegetation, when really it's just a change in the time of the season. And I had kind of already mentioned cost. Time of day, most satellites fly at noon. Does anybody want to take a guess why? Shadows. Yeah, shadows, and that's the time of day that clouds are least likely to have formed. So, for reasons. I'm going to let Chelsea take it over now.
Sweet. If you guys have questions along the way, feel free to jump in. But yeah, like Jen said, we've been satellite monitoring pretty consistently for the last 4 years. And so that all goes to say that it's still a huge learning process. So there is much to, learn from as we're going along. And, maybe that was the wrong assumption, and next time we'll do more research, or hey, we're not going out on the ground and this might not take the same amount of research and preparation as one would before going out on the ground monitoring, but it's still going to really help you out when it comes to context clues and checking out what you're seeing going on in the image. So now that you've picked the right image, what do you want to know before diving in? For instance, what activities are actually happening on the property is going to have a big impact on what you're seeing, and you can make a couple different deductions based on that. So is it farming? Is it ranching? Is it open to public? What happened in the last 2 years? So is the landowner building a new home? Did they contact you and say, hey, I'm going to convert my center pivot to dryland pasture? Maybe they are expanding a new building, or they want to create a new management plan. So there's lots of things that could be going on administratively and communications that will definitely factor into what you're seeing. Were there any known or reported major natural disturbances? So that's going to be really important, especially when you see high stream sediment flows, and maybe this was a really high, my image was in May 1st, and we had this enormous rain that just blew out this creek. That's also going to have an impact on greenness that you can see, erosion and fire and flood, if you knew that there was a fire in the area recently, and other disturbances like that. You're also going to want to, if you have the opportunity to see what's happening on adjacent land, Lens is really great because it does give this buffer area around the property boundary. So that way we can actually see encroachments that might be happening right over that line. And when was the image taken? So Jenn covered this a little bit too, but that's going to have a very big impact on why you're seeing dead vegetation maybe, or other things like that. So yeah. And sometimes when we look at an image, we find what objectively might look like a road, and something that is around the width of a vehicle and moves in a continuous and linear formation can actually turn out to be all of these other things. And we found that out by trial and error. And that was really, given feedback from the landowner. And a lot of the time it just takes that curiosity piece to not jump to conclusions first and be really objective in our observations and say what we saw, but not attribute an actual, it's a road. Because that can be really triggering language, especially in conservation easements too. So these are just a couple of things that also resemble roads. And then as we, look further, other challenges are definitely identifying man-made structures. Some things can just be too small to really be able to make out, like equipment and trailers and bulky things covered in tarps. We've made some, false assumptions as well. Things that look like a new building, but in reality, it's just a hay bale covered in a tarp, outside the building envelope. So again, context clues. Are they a farming operation? Here are some common things like irrigation infrastructure that you're going to see kind of laying around as well. And so next, I'm going to show you all a couple of images that we captured and monitored via satellite last year, or perhaps there are some older images as well. But I would love to throw out the opportunity to you all to kind of participate and just, talk about what you can see and maybe what you think it could be. So this image was taken in August. And say if you were going to satellite monitor this image, what would you do, to really take note of what's going on here? So take a second to just kind of scan over the landscape, and then I'll show you the year later. Did anyone notice a big change and want to guess to what they think it could be? Yes.
On the top, there's that giant scar. Made a flood.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah. That's a great guess. Anyone else? Jump top of mind? No. No, that's spot on. It scar of a major flood, and it's just an erosion event. And this was perplexing to us as well. But upon further inspection, there are some 3D tools that you can use in Lens, and you can check out the topography. So this really indicates that we're in this valley-like area. Another tool, it's really hard to see there, but those blue lines right here, there's a layer on Lens that also shows flow lines, and then there are also some other hydrology layers. So that is another indicator that this was a water-based event. And then we confirmed with the landowner. So this next image, we'll do the same thing. So this was taken in May. And just take a second to, this one is less, not as high quality resolution as the others, but I'll go to the next image. And I'll go back and forth a couple times just to see if anything jumps out at you. And does anyone see? Yeah.
There seems to be some kind of roundabout to the central west part of the, yeah.
Like there. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. We spotted that too. And what is this disturbance in an ellipses shape? Anyone care to guess?
ATV track.
It's a good guess. But anyone else?
Roman chariot.
A slow, roundabout. So we noticed that, and our monitors also noticed this lighter color over here that also, again, resembles a road. But as we, finished the monitoring report, our landowner wanted to see the monitoring report every year, so we sent it out, and we got great feedback. Neither of these were roads, but the first observation, the ellipses here, was actually a path being used to spread horse manure on a large meadow in the process of improving the soil to improve the meadow. So the elliptical pattern in this area moves each time the load is spread. And in time, the entire field will have a light spread of horse manure. So not anything we could have guessed, not anything we should have really gone into depth about in the monitoring report, but just another example of what crazy things you might see. So then this area here, we also guessed to be a road. However, it is not. It is an arroyo that just had a larger movement of sediment in that time of year. So it stands out, especially because the contrast of the color of this image really, gives us that stark change that we were seeing. And so now that we look back, I see the arroyo, but it is so much more prominent there that we guessed that it was guessed incorrectly. So, yeah. And then in this next photo, we'll do the same thing. This was in April, so keep that in mind. I mean, you'll see in the next photo, it's also not as pale pink as this one is. And so this one we found to be a lot more obvious. But again, who would want to guess? Road, right? Yeah.
Road.
We thought so. It's a fire break. So yes, vehicles drive on it, and yes, it is a disturbance in the width of a road, but it's also was happening during the time of an active fire where the Forest Service came in and created this fire break really quickly. didn't tell the landowner. The landowner didn't know either, because it's in terrain like this. And now that we look further, here it's along this really steep ridge, and then here's this valley, and the fire was coming this way, and homes were down here. So they cut this really quickly, and not a road. This next photo, you'll notice, was a lot older than the other photos, so not great resolution, but I thought this was interesting because this kind of stays true throughout the year. So take a look. I know it's really hard to really tell what's even going on right here, but as I go to the next one, that it was taken in 2023, there may not be differences that we're looking for in these photos, but could anyone guess to why they think there's this white coloration happening?
Looks like a mineral deposit or water reflection, one or the other.
Yeah. No, that's a great guess. And it is a mineral deposit from this area that's, highly wet. It's a wetland that gets wet and dries and wet and dries. And so that is, after the evaporation, can leave behind calcium and silica-based minerals. And not something that we would, be alarmed about because, hey, this is happening in 2011 and it's been happening in those lower resolution images that we could look back on throughout those years. That formation on the right, you may notice, is crop, hay crop. Great. This was just a little clip that I made because this was a feature in Lens where you can slide the bar back and forth to compare previous and later images. And so I'll just play, if I can find my mouse. Kind of goes quickly, so if you, let's see if I can pause that. Could anyone guess what that would be?
It's probably alien activity.
That's what I thought, right? Crop circles, right? Yeah. Anyone else?
Hay bale.
Good guess. Yes, hay bales. And for those of us who don't come from a farming or ranching background, this you don't often see out on the ground because you're close up. And this was, after we reached out to the landowner, he explained to us that there was a drought in the last 2 years. So over the winter, I'll preface this is the Eastern Plains. Over the winter, he was using hay flakes to feed his cows all winter long. So hence these weird little circles. And this was all over the property too. So it wasn't just in little areas. And we were like, what's going on? Yeah, I thought aliens as well. Well, yes, so I can't go over all of the challenges without touching on the many benefits of satellite imagery. And really, a huge benefit is that now you can see what you may never have been able to access by the ground. And that's such an advantage when you can easily spot construction happening and you can see encroachment happening outside the building envelope. Is my mouse? There it is. Okay. And honestly, just those hard to reach areas that that you may never have visited on the ground before, just because it's on. There may not be a photo point over there. And like Jen said, time savings. You can weigh that based on how your group needs to operate. Maybe you need to split up your properties and say, hey, I'm just gonna go on the foot on the ground to go monitor the building envelope. But with this giant ranch, forested property, steep property, I'm gonna do the rest by satellite because I can see actually so much better what's happening in the forest. That kind of goes into what we're able to see on a much larger physical and temporal scale now. So not only can we, see variations over time in vegetation health, but we can even spot like pine beetle outbreaks before the landowner even knows, because it's tucked away in this spot that they would not frequent regularly. We can even see changes in rangeland health. So that can always be tricky, because is it a man-made cause or is it just precipitation? Is it the drought? Is it, are we seeing these disturbances because people have always been walking on here, but it's always green except for these last couple years where there's just been no rain. So really having this tool, we can track these things and really take into account what's happening in the world. And then brings me to looking at restoration progress too. So those of you who do restoration work, it is such a great tool to be able to see, not the negative disturbance changes that I just showed to you all, but the positives. So this image shows a creek on U.S. Forest Service land, and Seawell partnered with them to do some restoration work. So it looks like a happy green creek, but it actually has lots of incision. There's not a lot of habitat complexity. It actually the water goes subsurface flow in areas. And so this was taken in June of 2022. And then almost 16 months later, this is what it looks like now after treatments. So this actually was a lot of woody debris that they put into the streams, and it invited beavers to come colonize the area. And this actually, you'll notice, is extremely high resolution because it was taken from an aerial drone. And then it was ortho-rectified imagery. So that's why the colors are they pop, and you can really see the detail.
That one's actually a photograph, which is a little different from imagery.
Yeah,
So yeah, these are photos.
So,
So photographs they're light that is collected from reflection from the sun only, or thermal radiation. It's a passive sensor that collects photographs. Imagery comes from active sensors, and there's a device that actually beams light energy down, and then the sensor collects that reflection back. So that's the difference between a photograph and a satellite image, but that is also why satellite images, you can apply vegetation indices and water analyses and kind of see beyond what the human eye can see. We didn't really show any like using a vegetation index and highlighting green vegetation versus dead vegetation, but we wouldn't be able to do that type of analysis with the photo that's on the screen now. But if that had been taken with an active sensor, we might be able to like make colors pop and see things that the human eye can't see.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm gonna skip this because this is more checking out images. Big change here. This is actually a right-of-way that was pre-easement, and we just saw them coming in after they needed to do some work, and we're like, oh, look at that. And I know we're coming up on the end of our time, but just a little wrap up was we wanted to just reiterate that, there is a time to get out on the ground, but there's also so much benefit from using satellite imagery and on the ground monitoring. They're just so much stronger together. Stay objective. Natural and man-made changes are going to be really hard to decipher between, and use your background land knowledge, what happened on that property, and from a stewardship perspective, just always stay curious and ask questions before jumping to conclusions. We are constantly learning that, especially with the language that we use in our monitoring reports, and I think it's just we have such a great community here that we can all reach out to each other and kind of try to problem solve these things that we see. And so I invite you all to talk and let us know if you have any questions, but also I'd love to learn from you guys who use satellite imagery or other types of remote monitoring techniques. And that is all we have today. So thank you all. Yeah. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I think we're on 40. Yeah? Okay, cool. Hi, yeah.
Hey, really nice talk. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge. I was just curious, you talked about the NLCD. They have that change detection data set. Have you played around with the NLCD change detection at all?
Not for Colorado open lands yet, but we've been playing around with NLCD and Cropscape across different years and trying to compare them at the moment with no major findings yet. Just
one thing too with Cropscape, as someone who's used it a fair bit, sometimes it will be quite wrong on the Cropscape, and landowners will be like, wait, we've never grown that in Colorado's history. They're getting better, but
another good plug for checking with your landowner.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
love the
thank you.
stories. Those are great. And just a quick fun example, I'm with the Natural Heritage Program, and we survey some really difficult areas. And so there's these plateaus around the Roan Plateau that have these talus-shaped slopes that harbor these rare plants that are almost death-risking to go survey. And so we've been flying drones to sneak around and find new populations.
Oh,
And
cool.
So it also, getting back to your point of seeing what you can. And I think, it's great to demonstrate bad things that are happening and to use it as a tool like that, but I love that you're showing restoration so the landowners are less afraid of this too. It's like it could be a success story too, and it's not always because in Larimer County we have a famous thing called haystack rock that the landowners covered with hay so that they would get a higher valuation on their land and fool the people. And I could totally see the inverse happening of someone covering a house with hay when they know the satellite.
And
so like keeping it so that it's a two-way street, so
Yeah.
they're not thinking of the next way to outsmart the system, and that they want to show their success, probably be a really good idea long term, because it has historically happened, and I guarantee if this becomes a regular thing, people will start fooling you all.
oh, wow.
They do.
That's fascinating. Gotta have a lot of hay for that.
It's a famous rock now. It's graffitied every year, and it's about to be under NITS. So I
Oh.
think they may move it.
Yeah.
It's got quite the history.
Jeez, that's awesome. Yeah.
So, in Colorado open lands, this is relatively new. So do you take images every year, every 2 years, every 4 years? What's kind of your protocol on this?
Yeah, so like Jen mentioned, with the pandemic, it was almost 100% satellite imagery that year for about 700 properties as well. So from then, we've been trying to move our ratio to more of a 50-50. But our internal policy, we like to get on the ground at least once every 3 years. So that means that, yes, a property can be monitored via satellite 2 years in a row if it has to be. But we like to get out a little bit more often than that. So then we can only need to buy about 50% of our portfolio's images.
How much does it cost for something like that?
Yeah, so for Lens, there's a subscription cost up front. And I think that's anywhere from, I can't remember now, $4,000 to $6,000 for the subscription for the year. That's not including the purchase of the imagery. And then for 6 cents an acre, you can get high resolution imagery. And then for lower resolution imagery, it's only 4 cents per acre.
It's worth noting that low resolution in this case is,
Medium.
yeah,
right?
it's like 1.5 meters. It's
Yeah.
still pretty good.
Yeah, it's still,
Considering not that long ago, people were paying thousands of dollars for 10 meter and 20 meter and 30 meter resolution imagery.
right, yeah. Yeah.
Do you let your landowner know? I mean, how do you approach your landowner that we're going to use satellite images? Are they pretty open to that, or are they freaked out by that, or
You
what's that
know,
conversation look like?
that's a great question. We notify every landowner at the beginning of the monitoring season whether we're going to reach out to them in a few weeks, months to come on the ground, or your property will be monitored via satellite this year. Please let us know if you have any issues with that. Come to us, and maybe you want us to come out on the ground instead. We can absolutely do that. And we do have properties on that rotation basis, but then we also have properties that are like, nope, we go to those every year because that's a preference. So Yeah.
Sometimes it's a nice education opportunity to let landowners know that this exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do this, yeah.
Yeah.
And not
A
just us,
publicly
but like,
accessible deal, yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
different era of privacy.
It is. Yeah.
What is that word?
I have a lesson learned from us using Lens.
Please. Yeah.
Be mindful of your shapefile. So our shapefiles aren't always perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and I can think of two examples where the boundary of the easement, in one case it looked like there was encroachment from the neighboring property developing the road in like a little build site,
Mm-hmm.
and it took quite a bit of research. It was a huge red flag, but I don't know if we ever got clarity, but I don't think it was right on the edge.
So
But our
hard.
projection had it like very much in the easement.
Yeah.
And then another scenario I worked on and missed was it looked like they encroached into the easement,
Mm-hmm.
and but the shapefile was also wrong. So it was like, oh, okay, wrote it off as the shapefile being incorrect.
Yeah.
Upon getting a survey, they did encroach
Oh.
3 feet into the easement.
Yeah.
So it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah. It can flip flop, right? You know, either your projection can be wrong or it is, you know, showing something is happening. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say at Colorado Open Lands too, at the end of the monitoring season, the stewardship team tends to make a list of, oh, there might be something wrong with the boundary here. And it becomes a winter season item to actually review all those boundaries before jumping to the conclusion, because that is not something you want to accuse anybody of.
And
Lightly.
Jen's job gets really hard and busy after a lot of those yeah, it happens so much where it's like right on the line, and how accurate can you really be, and remapping a lot of boundaries. You've done that a lot, so.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. It's really important.
Could I just make a really quick plea based off of that?
Yeah.
We also manage COMAP, which maps all the conservation easements to Colorado. And let me
Yeah.
tell you, behind the scenes in God's country, it's pretty ugly. The Forest Service, BLM, slivers overlap every time, no matter what. But the topography errors, some land trusts have very beginning GIS staff. And what we get is not awesome. And other land trusts like TNC could probably work for anybody, and have perfect maps. And so the range of abilities of mapping across land trusts
Yeah.
varies greatly. And if you all can please let us know COMAP changes.
Yeah.
We only know what's reported to us, and then we have to sort of smush everything together and make it work. And we do often actively reach out with questions, but a lot of times it's GIS processes, just smoothing things. I'm sure other GIS people in the room understand what I'm talking about, topography errors and things like that. And
Yeah.
reach out and we'll get the data better so that these accidental overlaps on COMAP don't happen like you were talking about. So where
Absolutely.
you think it is on an easement, it's not, because it's just bad mapping.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, because we do use COMAP quite a bit too, and it's just
It's wrong sometimes
a great-
because we get
yeah.
wrong data in, wrong data out,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. Thank you.
Chelsea, I'll add
Yeah.
that some of the properties that we don't have centimeter resolution imaging available for in some of those rural areas, what I did this year was I used some of the infrared and near imagery to at least get a good evaluation of what the vegetation was from year to year, because it's a big ranch property, there's no structures that I'm worried about, but I want to compare, I don't have high resolution, but I
Right.
could at least see, okay, this year it was much wetter than it was last year. I could see where the extent of vegetation was. I could see where the extent of irrigation was. So
Yeah.
in lieu of having good high resolution imagery, you can use some of those other layers to give you an idea of what's going on the property without having that good image available.
Yeah. And what's really cool that you bring that up with water as well. It's not a fix-all for checking water rights usage, but it can be such a great indicator. When you see a center pivot on satellite imagery, it's green or it's fallow, and you can track through that infrared imagery, the greenness over the years, and you can really see a drop in a year where they didn't apply water, and I think that is such a cool tool. Yeah.
This is part 2 of the split session. There's not a break built in, but if you need to leave, I won't be offended. It'll also be a little bit of a change of pace. My name's Emma Lietz Bilecky. You can use either or both. And I'm the Land Link Director with Guidestone, Colorado, which is a nonprofit based out of Salida. We're not a land trust, but we're hoping that our program can collaborate with some land trusts across the state. So this is me. I'm from Colorado. Before I joined Land Link, I was farming for 8 years in all those states. I managed farms for 4 years and kind of specialized in building farm-to-institution partnerships, so working with school districts and a seminary, actually. And then before that, got a Master of Environmental Management and Theological Studies at Duke. Here's what's on my agenda. I'll talk a tiny bit about Guidestone. I'll talk a lot more about Colorado Land Link and land access challenges in our state and what we can do about it. So Guidestone Colorado is a nonprofit organization dedicated to growing a vibrant agricultural future through education, community building, and partnerships. Colorado Land Link, as a program of Guidestone Colorado, is creating innovative solutions to the challenges of agricultural land access and land succession, while providing professional, educational, and resource support to ranchers, farmers, landowners, and land seekers in order to secure agriculture's future on the land. So Guidestone has 4 core programs. Land Link is one of them, but the other things we do are based mostly out of Salida. We run kids camps out of our 2 main sites. Our historic Hutchinson Homestead, which is a partnership that we've developed with a 6th-generation ranching family in Chaffee County to run educational programming and historic education on their ranch. Our Farm to School program is based out of a partnership with Salida School District, where we grow food for 6 school district campuses on land that we have a long-term lease on in central Salida. And then Colorado Land Link is what I'm talking about. If you're in Salida, here's just kind of a plug for some of our events throughout the year. You're welcome at any or all of them. We do an annual Agri-Summit conference in March. We do a music series in the summertime at a historic grist mill on the property and a harvest festival in the fall. So kind of the origins of Colorado Land Link and how we got started. The organization, Guidestone, actually started with some land access challenges. So before Guidestone was a nonprofit, it was a farm. And we had been farming 30 years on a property in the Front Range, and after 30 years, lost the lease on that land. And all the farmers on that land were kind of like thrown into chaos, decided to relocate to Chaffee County and start what was then called the Central Colorado Land Link Initiative, which was based kind of in and around Chaffee County. But then we realized that this land access was a problem and a need across our state. So we expanded to become Colorado Land Link in 2012. Have been developing partnerships with landowners across the state, kind of starting on our home turf. So I kind of mentioned our relationship with Salida School District. That was a long process that resulted in a long-term lease for our organization to be able to grow food for our community. And then in 2017, we established a database, so online, we're collecting, landowners come to us to advertise their properties with our network of land seekers. That started in 2017 and has been growing. And then in 2022, Guidestone was actually gifted land, 8 acres of land in Canyon City that's in a conservation easement that we're working on making available to a beginning farmer. So land access, kind of defining the problem here. You all will be familiar, obviously, with the development pressure across Colorado. But American Farmland Trust put out an interesting report called Farms Under Threat 2040. And in that report, they estimated that Colorado will pave over, fragment, or compromise 417,000 acres of farm and ranch land, and 53% of that conversion is going to happen on Colorado's best ag land, mostly concentrated in El Paso, Douglas, and Larimer counties. And for context, that's the equivalent of about 1,900 farms, 86 million in farm output, and 3,000 jobs. Another kind of piece of the problem, the average age of farmers in Colorado is around retirement age, 58 years old. 1 in every 3 producers is over the age of 65. So as producers retire and transition out of production, all that land is going to need a new generation of stewards. So by 2030, 400 million acres of farmland across the US is expected to change hands. And the last kind of piece of this puzzle is just thinking with an equity lens. Because of historic policies of discrimination, most of the farmland that is owned in our country is owned by older white men, not only farmers over the age of 58, but primarily white landowners. So 98% of farmland in our country is owned by white people. Land access and kind of development, more on this. Here's the map that AFT put out about projected agricultural land use conversion by 2040. So the red is kind of the hot spot there. But we see that like as we move out of the more metro and urban counties in rural Colorado, like where we're based in Salida, a lot of that development is low density residential, which is targeting these agricultural lands. The price of land has also increased. In 2023, the average farmland real estate value increased 10%. And of cropland, that was 5%. I don't need to read all of these, but you kind of get the idea. And then climate change. I think this is also important to mention. I like to say that farmers are on the front lines of climate change. And when climate change is paired with climate risks or paired with financial risks, that exacerbates risk for our farmers and puts them in precarious situations. So this is from the CWCB Climate Change in Colorado report, just published this year. Drought, heat waves, wildfire. This is from the National Young Farmers Coalition, a report they put out in 2020. And they say that ownership of farmland or secure farmland access is key to building equity for young farmers. This report's from 2011, also by the National Young Farmers Coalition, which shows that since 1890, farm demographics have basically flipped. So now most of our farmers, as I already kind of mentioned, are nearing that 65 range. In a survey that the National Young Farmers Coalition conducted in 2022, they found that land access was the #1 issue facing young farmers, with 59% of young farmers reporting that finding affordable farmland was very or extremely challenging, and that number is exacerbated for farmers of color. To kind of bring it home to Colorado, I wanted to plug this report that MLC and La Plata Open Space Conservancy put out recently, studying land access challenges in Colorado, based on the Southwest region primarily. But they went through a series of community listening sessions and identified the key kind of guiding values that their community wanted to prioritize in improving land access and visions for what equitable land access in the Southwest region looks like. So some of the values included perpetual stewardship, learning from the land in ancestral ways, physical and emotional health, and building bridges. I won't read all of them, but I do recommend. So why LandLink? With the LandLink approach, we're trying to improve equity by assisting young, beginning, and historically marginalized farmers in accessing land and the resources they need to run thriving agricultural businesses. We want to improve food security in our communities by keeping agricultural land in agricultural production. We want to honor the legacy of our land stewards who have cared for the land that is under threat. And we want to build strong intergenerational community between young farmers and retiring farmers who have a wealth of knowledge and experience to share. And whether or not we identify as farmers, I just wanted to say that farming really is a public service. And farmers don't, get into farming to make a bunch of money. They get into farming to feed their communities. And so I want to ask how we as a community can support those who are called to farming and those livelihoods. LandLink, we're trying to promote the kind of mutual benefit that landowner and land seeker connections can provide. We're trying to facilitate mentorship relationships. We're trying to reduce cost of entry for young farmers entering agriculture, help landowners and land seekers both define their needs and their goals. We're trying to build and share equity and think equity kind of beyond the value of land, but equity also in terms of business, equity, community relationships, things like that. The LandLink approach can help preserve water rights and confer tax benefits to landowners, but I really want to say that a lot of our landowners are motivated by more than that. They're motivated by this desire to preserve their legacy and the agricultural heritage of their community. They're motivated by conservation, as you all know, and also by land justice. So Colorado LandLink is not unique in our approach. There's about 40 programs like ours nationwide. A lot of them work on a state-by-state basis, but some of them are also regional. They serve farmers and ranchers. Most of them have a database of land postings like ours, but they also provide support services that help both landowners and land seekers access the resources that they need in order to make beneficial connections. This text is small, but I just wanted to list all of the LandLink programs and say that it's important for us to be working together because what we see is that land seekers sometimes have flexible geographies. So they might be looking in Colorado, but then ultimately end up in New Mexico. And so it's a real benefit for us to kind of have relationships with like-minded organizations. So kind of what we do basically is our land linking services is the first step there is advertising these properties on our database, connecting qualified land seekers with landowners when they want to take that step. And then in order to make a match, we don't write leases, but we point land seekers and landowners to resources to help them consider how to do so. Sometimes, it's a lease. Sometimes landowners are looking to sell, land seekers are looking to buy. But sometimes it doesn't look like either, and it looks like a job. And that's also, we consider that a success. Some of the other support services that we provide is we do a landowner or a land seeker intake with every new applicant that comes to us. We do kind of landowner education right now informally, although I will say we're looking at what it would look like to host workshops with landowners in the future to share about our program. With our land seekers, we have more formalized programs, helping them with business planning. We also go and visit properties when we feel it's appropriate. And our location in central Colorado makes that actually kind of doable. So who are our land seekers? Often they're new and beginning farmers with little experience. They're also established farmers who have lost leases. I got a call from a rancher in Kansas who was desperately looking for some grazing land. So we get all kinds of land seekers. Landowners can be transitioning or retiring producers. They can also be non-farming landowners, folks who get into land but don't necessarily know how to manage it and are looking for help. Also institutional landowners. So I mentioned our school district in Salida, churches. We have one property right now in the Front Range that's owned by a hospital system, actually, that's looking to kind of close the loop on their food supply, so produce food for the hospital cafeteria on the land that they own. And land trusts, right? So whether land trusts actually own land or hold easement on land. This is what our site currently looks like. This is public facing, so anybody can go and browse. We put a select number of postings up on our website for free. And then we also have a private list that only our paid land seekers have access to. It's a pretty nominal fee. It's $30 to join forever. We're looking at kind of improving this database to automate connections and also enable the opportunity for landowners to see and communicate with land seekers. So right now it's just our properties that are listed, but in the future we hope to have kind of like land seeker profiles that folks can browse as well. This is what the intake process would look like. We ask a series of questions. What you're seeking in a farmer, what you're willing to offer. And then after our landowners submit this form, we have a one-on-one conversation with them. And we like to ask, sometimes we get landowners who need a little bit of education. So need to maybe understand how hard it is to be a farmer. And it might take some convincing that they aren't going to get something for free. Like they're not going to get beautification, basically, of their land, unless it's a good situation for the seeker at the same time. And this is our page for land seekers. With land seekers, we tend to provide a little bit more kind of one-on-one coaching. Right now, we have a list of about 250 land seekers across the state. And this is where our properties are. I mean, they're not our properties, but they're listed with us. So you can see there's a big spread. There's a mix of farmland, ranch land. There is obviously greater demand in some parts of the state, like in the Front Range and in the Four Corners area. But as I kind of mentioned, land seeker geography also tends to be a little bit flexible depending on the situation. Some of these properties do have conservation easements, but not many, like right now around 10%. Although we'd like to see more. We also have an Instagram page, Facebook page, so you can follow us. We post some properties there as well. This year, we were able to invite a small group of land seekers to the homestead for a vision course and provide them with kind of direct business coaching and also community to think about what they want in a future farm and what they're seeking. This is really kind of what the beginning stages of the process looks like. Sometimes people think that they're seeking land, but in the process of kind of writing down their business plan on paper might realize, I need a little bit more training first. I need mentorship, or maybe I need a job before getting into land myself. So we like to kind of help people think through those pieces. Guidestone can't do everything for land seekers, landowners, so we rely on a lot of support organizations. And these are just some of the national support organizations that really make our work possible. So if you're not familiar with these guys already, super helpful on the succession planning side Farm Commons and the Farmland Access Legal Toolkit provide leasing and succession planning resources in both English and Spanish. Young Farmers connects young farmers to one another regionally in kind of a chapter-based system. American Farmland Trust, I think a lot of you are familiar with, does a navigators program and land transfer training, land access training. The Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program funded by NIFA is a big connector. Agrarian Trust kind of piloted the Agrarians Commons model, which MLC is going to be experimenting with. So yeah, lots to learn and lots of great folks kind of working in this space. There's also a number of farmer training programs based out of Colorado. So we kind of see these programs as key in like our land seeker pipeline. Again, kind of based all over the state, a couple in Denver, Montrose, Durango, the Valley. So these are key partners as well. Yeah, and we rely on a lot of other people and professionals to do what we do. I do want to say, like, making a link, a match, is notoriously difficult. Everyone who like runs any land link program across the country tells me this, is matches are really hard to make. And that's because everyone's situation is so unique. And it sometimes takes years to develop relationships that ultimately result in land tenure. So we've made 2 matches this year, which I feel actually really good about. Those matches tend to kind of be our land seekers who have the most initiative and the strongest kind of like business planning already done. But yeah, we also kind of want to define success a little bit more broadly. So even a lot of our seekers want to own their property. That's, again, not always feasible or possible. I kind of mentioned the education piece, so like landowner expectations versus reality. Like, what does a landowner expect a young farming partner to do for them versus what are they willing to provide in the way of mentorship and things like that, even investment. So yeah, I'd love to kind of reserve the rest of the time for just a conversation, hear a little bit more about how LandLink can help you all do what you're already doing, or answer any questions. Thanks. Yes.
What did those successful matches look like? Was it, just this brilliant understanding between 2 people, or was it?
Yeah, the 2 this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the one was a property in Boulder County with a conservation easement. Housing was not available because the landowner was living in the house that was on the property, of course. So we connected her with a lot of different farmers. I mean, it was a really cool property, obviously a really valuable location in terms of like market access. But the trick was like someone would have needed to like have housing and also like equipment available too. It was a hay field, and she didn't have any of that. So we actually found someone who was renting a house in Longmont in the area and was already kind of doing what she wanted done, which was kind of like to begin this regenerative transition process on an adjacent field. So in that case, it's like, well, maybe we weren't helping a farmer that was like desperately in need of access, but we're helping a farmer expand their business in a beneficial way. And in that case, it's like going to be really impossible for anyone else to kind of like take over in a way that really made sense for them. The other one's actually in Salida, closer to us. So it's a farmer that's sort of just starting out, and we're kind of like seeing it as a little bit of an incubator plot. So she's not thinking she'll be there super long term, but she's trying to get her feet wet, learn how to be a farmer in Salida. And there was this property that was farmed, CSA farm, by a woman who is no longer able to do that for herself, and has offered it in exchange for vegetables. So it's a work trade. Yeah. Yes.
I wonder if you could talk talk more about how the program does or can address the equity issue. So
Yeah.
are there any qualifiers to like the affordability piece for being able to list land or anything like that? How do you go about that?
The affordability piece to list land for landowners?
Yeah, for them to list something that's available, like do you have any kind of filters or qualifiers that make it more affordable or equitably accessible for land seekers?
Yeah. No, not really. I mean, there's this one property right now that we have on the list it's for sale. It's been for sale for several years. It has a conservation easement on it in the valley. And it's like, no one's going to be able to buy it because it's too expensive. So we kind of let the properties like filter themselves. I think we're at a point where I guess our feeling is that like the more properties we have in the database, like the more we'll be able to learn like which properties really end up being the successful ones, and then maybe like develop that filter based on experience. But right now we're still in the stage of like trying to build up the database to make it more usable and helpful for our land seekers. But yeah, that's a good question. Like, I don't know, we're not like on Zillow, like copying and pasting like properties for sale. So it's really like if the landowner wants to be listed with us, we generally list their land. Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple ways that you all are looking through land seeker application with the intake form and some one-on-one mentoring. I'm curious if you have considered or if you all are currently doing anything around specific land management or soil management practices.
Yeah. No. Yeah, and that's another thing that I think that we should add to the like intake process, because we do see a lot of landowners coming to us because they're seeking that specifically. And so right now that's just sort of like in their like preferences notes, and that would be something that I would communicate to anybody that would want to talk to that individual. But no, again, we're not like screening for that yet because we're trying to be accessible and inclusive. But it's definitely like a trend that we see for sure. Yeah.
For land seekers, what is affordable and how do they figure out what is affordable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know, and it varies so much, like ag rents. So like I gave those like statewide statistics, but I know like in Boulder, it's like crazy, you know? So it probably like depends where you are, I suppose. That's a good question. I don't know. You know, like that would be something that we would look at like in a business plan, like what do you expect to make? What can you afford? But I'm not sure if there's like a threshold, like a percentage of income that, I don't know. Bud, do you have any thoughts on that?
I feel like I've seen it all over the place, and it's exactly based on the operation and how much land they need, how much infrastructure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Have you all worked with the state land board at all? And how does that work with them? You're thinking in particular about the recent story on the Chico Basin Ranch and all drama there.
I don't know anything about that.
Okay, it was a really
Tell me more.
conservation ranch on a very important, large historic ranch in the Chico Basin, which also harbors some of the best conservation values in the prairies, Colorado. The Phillips owned it for several years. We're Conservancy in the Rockies and several other organizations. And the state land board has to do the highest economic use. And so during the recent bid, they lost the bid to another ranch that's going to stock it much heavier to get $2 million more to the state land board for their lease than the Phillips could. And so now the Phillips don't have any land, and they have this incredible track record of engaging with the community, have been lauded. And so I'm just curious if folks like that work with you or not. I'm learning about your programs. And so the state land board has land in every section. There's like section 36 on all the different townships is given to the state of Colorado to then lease to raise money for higher ed in the state, and most of that is farmed and ranch.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks. Yeah.
How about like succession planning resources? Do you have aging landowners call and say like, I just need not help just finding a successor, but how do I do the transfer, like what do I just need to do?
Yeah, yeah.
Connect them?
I know, and we haven't gone through that process yet, like at Guidestone, but definitely like seeing that as a need. I think right now, like how we're set up would be to like, again, point folks to other resources because we're not professionals, we don't have an attorney on staff. But yeah, like definitely some kind of crisis situations where people are like thinking about land succession for the first time when it's already maybe a little too late or a little late in the game. Yeah.
Something that might be helpful
Yeah.
for us is if you all had the capacity to maintain a resource database.
Yeah.
That we could help point landowners to. And
Yeah.
we could all like collaborate on the who's who.
For sure.
But it'd be nice to have a hub.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say we have a resource page already where we have some. I think it needs updated. But yeah, we'll be in touch about that. It's a great idea.
We don't want to do it.
Great. On my list.
If we have, I'm already thinking of several landowners, and since we've talked, who would be perfect landowners for this program.
Mhm.
Should we just send them to the website? Should they reach out to talk
Yeah.
about it? Okay.
Yeah, I would say have them fill out an application if they're at that stage. If they want more information, I'd be happy to talk. Yeah. Well, thank you.